My name is Chin Song. I am 38 years old this year, and I am a well-known horror novelist. For many years, I have been focusing on the creation of horror themes and have a deep understanding of this field. Other authors' horror novels can no longer interest me, only my own works can still scare me, but as my level improves, it becomes increasingly difficult to break through myself. In recent years, I have been suffering from a lack of inspiration, which has been torturing me every moment. I can't bear to sit at my desk and not be able to find the right words to express. It's better to retire than to write disappointing works. Therefore, I announce my retirement. However, a letter from a reader broke my originally peaceful life. Last weekend, my wife and her best friend went to an exhibition while I was reading in the study. That day, the postman delivered a thick letter addressed to me, which needed to be signed for personally. As a writer, I often receive letters from readers, most of which express their appreciation for my work or their admiration for me personally. Some are even in thick envelopes, containing stories written by the readers themselves, hoping for my guidance. I opened this letter and casually read a few lines, realizing that it wasn't a novel, but a beautifully handwritten letter from a female reader. I continued reading and suddenly felt a subtle sense of dread. Dear Mr. Chin Song, I am a regular working woman and also a loyal reader of yours. I am writing this letter with a heart filled with apprehension, hoping that you can understand. I have always silently supported you, but I always feel that I am different from other readers. Now, you are suffering from a lack of inspiration and have even announced an indefinite hiatus. I feel that I can no longer remain silent, so I have written this long letter to share with you a terrifying experience I went through. This experience is like a demon, constantly consuming my vitality, and it will haunt me for the rest of my life. I can certainly say that the only person I can confide in is my favorite writer. Mr. Chin Song, 10 years ago, we had a brief encounter. It was in our country's Xin town, do you remember? That year was 1998, I was 18 years old and in my senior year of high school. At that time, I was introverted and solitary, and my only hobby was reading. I had a classmate named Shinyu. We had similar interests and often skipped PE classes together to go to the library and read. During that time, there were basically no other people in the school library, and we had a peaceful time that was ours alone. Until one day, when we came to the library, we saw a strange man reading by the window. He looked up at us and had a pale complexion, looking spiritless. However, when the sunlight shone on his face, his beautiful eyes looked especially gentle. He introduced himself as a writer named Chin Song, specializing in horror novels. At that time, he had just entered the literary world and was unknown. His usual routine was to travel to different places, read, create, and experience life in a new place for 3 months, and then move on to the next place. Now, his journey in Xin town had just begun. He rented a 2-story rural self-built house here and learned that the only library in town was at our high school. After obtaining the principal's consent, he was allowed to freely enter the school to borrow books. Both me and Chinyu loved reading, so we were extremely excited when we learned about the writer Chin Song. On that day, Chin Song shared many fascinating experiences with us. We were so engrossed that the time passed quickly during the physical education class. The girls in the small town were full of curiosity, and Chin Song was more than happy to share. From then on, every physical education class, we would meet up with Chin Song at the library, reading and discussing literature together. Chin Song would tell us about his past traveling experiences and show us the novels he had written. As time went by, those days always seemed to be filled with sunshine in our memories. Outside the window, the students were playing soccer and skipping rope, while the 3 of us were chatting about literature inside the window. As the temperature gradually rises in summer, the mood of the young girls also changes subtly. A month after getting to know Chin Song, I realized that I had fallen in love with him. Although he is 10 years older than me, I don't think age is a problem, and the affinity of the soul is the most important. My secret love for him kept me awake at night, filled with excitement. However, despite the waves raging inside me, I still maintained a calm appearance on the outside, because my personality is introverted and solitary. Through love, I became more aware of the gap between myself and Chinyu. Chinyu and I grew up together since childhood and have been good friends for many years. For the first time, I discovered that I was not as pretty as Chinyu, nor as outgoing and confident as her. Every time we talked to Chinsong in the library, it seemed that Chinyu always spoke first. I often haven't organized my words yet, and Chinyu has already expressed the same idea fluently. Most of the time, I was just listening and occasionally agreeing with a few words. Chinyu and I were always inseparable, going to school together, skipping classes together, studying in the library together, and even going to the bathroom during break together. However, now I feel that such a life is binding me, and I don't want to go to the library with Chinyu anymore. The idea of meeting Chinsong alone has been swirling in my head for a long time, but I haven't been able to act on it because I haven't found a suitable reason. When there is only 1 month left before the college entrance examination, time becomes tight and physical education classes are taken over. We don't have time to meet at the library with Chinsong, and both Chinyu and I feel sad about it. Chinsong encourages us to study hard, and after we finish the exam, he should also have finished his novel. He invites us to visit him during the summer vacation to read his novel. During that month of intensive preparation for the college entrance examination, Chinsong's invitation becomes the only motivation for me to study. I think of Chinsong while memorizing knowledge points, and my longing for him increases day by day. The accumulation of 1 month's love gives me the courage to make a change. After the college entrance examination, I will bravely express my feelings to him. After the college entrance examination, time flew by. Our original plan was to visit Chinsong's home the day after the exam, with Chinyu and me. However, I went there a day earlier without telling Chinyu. Chinsong rented a self-built house outside the village, surrounded by forests and streams, with a quiet environment and rarely disturbed by others. In the countryside, the gates are usually open, but it's also polite to knock on the door before entering someone else's home. At that time, I was so preoccupied with confessing my feelings to Chinsong that I nervously and impulsively walked right in. I didn't see Chinsong on the first floor, so I went up to the second floor. The light on the second floor was darker, and I saw a door slightly ajar, with a long slit in it through which light was shining, but I couldn't see what was inside. I had a hunch that Chinsong was in this room, maybe reading or writing. I rehearsed the confession in my mind, imagining Chinsong's reaction, feeling restless and uneasy inside. But my feet didn't hesitate as I walked towards the slightly ajar door, the short distance seeming to become unusually long, and time seemed to move slowly. Finally standing in front of the door, I raised my hand to knock on the door, and the world suddenly became quiet. My mind became clear. I heard a girl inside calling Chinsong's name softly and speaking intimately. I was stunned and felt as if I had been struck by lightning. Although I had just turned 18 and was not very knowledgeable, I understood what was happening in the room. That ambiguous voice belonged to my good friend Chinyu. While I was still immersed in the pursuit of spiritual compatibility, Chinyu had already entered another stage. She had begun to play grown-up games with Chinsong. I shook my head in disbelief and took a step back. The door in front of me slowly turned and softly closed. I turned around and left, tiptoeing as quietly as I had come, and only after I returned home did I feel anger and unwillingness, and a sense of betrayal. Of course, I didn't tell Chinyu about my feelings for Chinsong. Chinyu didn't tell me either, we were even, fair competition. But I couldn't stand Chinyu avoiding me and acting alone. Although I had done the same thing, I couldn't bear Chinyu doing it directly. How could Chinyu be so shameless? And Chinsong, he looked like a gentleman, always talking about philosophy, but in the end, he still did that. My worldview collapsed. I felt the betrayal of friendship and love. I felt very angry and thought I had to do something to make them pay. So, I held my breath and inadvertently revealed this secret to the most gossipy girl in class, asking her to keep it a secret, but as expected, secrets always get leaked. That girl just didn't reveal me as the source of the secret. Within just a day, the news spread throughout the class and soon reached the adults. When it reached the two involved, Chinsong admitted openly, while Chinyu avoided everyone. After all, Chinsong was just a temporary resident here, and a man, he had nothing to fear. But Chinyu was a native local, an 18-year-old young girl, and her reputation was completely ruined. Mr. Chinsong, although I am mentioning old matters again, I ask you to believe that I am only stating this experience and have no other intention. I have never mentioned this memory to anyone, and the locals did not know that the person involved has become a well-known writer today. During those days, the scandal of Chinyu was the subject of everyone's conversation, while I was plunged into deep torment. I reflected on whether my behavior was excessive, but then thought, since Chinyu had no shame in the first place, why should I restrain myself? In any case, I made up my mind not to associate with such people anymore, and indeed, that is what happened. That year was 1998. The residents of the town were conservative in their beliefs and particularly valued the chastity of women. Therefore, the Chin family was unable to continue living in the town due to shame. One early morning in July, they moved out of the town. Shortly after, Chinsong, who had stayed there for 3 months, also packed up and left for the next stop. I spent a boring summer and then left the town to attend university in the city. That summer, all the friendships and stirrings of adolescence naturally came to an end. University life allowed me to encounter a broader world, make new friends, and meet my boyfriend. My social life seemed to be unaffected. However, only I knew that I often dreamed of that door, the one left slightly ajar in the dark. A narrow beam of light leaked through the gap, and I had pushed the door open countless times. After the blinding light, I would see Chinsong and Chinyu lying in bed together, or my friends and boyfriend lying in bed together. In every subsequent relationship, I couldn't help but suspect, couldn't truly trust in friendship and love, so none of my relationships lasted. My friends and boyfriend eventually left me, despite their innocence. During those years, many people came and went, and I was living a lonely life all by myself, with a once sparse spiritual life. Once upon a time, I was very fond of reading novels and even fell in love with a writer. However, after the love faded away, my interest in novels also disappeared. During my junior year of college, the horror writer Chinsong gradually came to prominence, and my classmates were all discussing him. Some even recommended his works to me, but I wasn't interested. I didn't care about his affairs and went on like that for several years. After graduating from college, I worked for a year. In 2003, one day, my mother suddenly contacted me and asked me to return to my hometown to attend Chinyu's funeral. The name that was both familiar and unfamiliar to me once again echoed in my ears, but it was the news of her unexpected demise. After asking for leave from my company, I rushed back to my hometown. At the entrance of Chin's home, there were endless mourners. Upon entering, the hall was filled with a coffin in the center. Chinyu's parents and brother sat on both sides, and her photos hung on the wall, a picture taken during high school. Her round cheeks, eyes smiling like 2 crescent moons, and lively expression seemed like she was about to call me out to play any second. Looking at that photo, it felt like just yesterday. I couldn't believe it, parting with my good friend 5 years ago, and now we were separated by the world of the living and the dead. The things of the past were no longer mentioned, and everyone regretted the sudden death of a young girl. Chinyu's mother grabbed my hand and cried, Your best friend has come to see you." I walked forward, unsure whether to bow or kowtow. Chinyu's mother told me that they had returned to their hometown to clean up the old house and stay for a few days. One day, in the late afternoon, Chinyu went for a walk and fell into the river. It was the flood season, with heavy rain and fast-moving water. The villagers helped to search for 3 days and 3 nights before finding her body. When her body was found, it had swollen and presented a horrific scene. As I listened to these descriptions, it felt like I was hearing a social news report. I still couldn't associate it with the girl in the photo, so I could only offer a dry comfort before leaving Chinyu's house. I wandered aimlessly, still familiar with the streets and scenery of my hometown, where I had grown up. I walked this road to school, meeting Chinyu at that intersection. I walked that road to the street, bidding farewell to Chinyu at that intersection. Everywhere I went, I could recall the scenes of my time with Chinyu. As I walked, The wetness at the corner of my mouth alerted me to the fact that I was already crying. A once beautiful and vibrant girl, she had become only a sigh from the people. Apart from this life, there was nothing else of great importance. So many years have passed, and many things really should be put down. I sincerely prayed for Chin Moon's rest and blessings, hoping that she could find peace. When I passed by the town's bookstore, I bought a new novel by Mr. Chen Song. From that moment, I started reading novels again. Nowadays, I have read all your works and have become a loyal reader. Recently, I watched your interview, and you said that you have too much pressure and decided to stop writing. I can understand this, because psychological pressure is not something that can be put down easily. When I attended the funeral many years ago, I made up my mind to put the past behind me. However, even after all these years, I still can't stop having nightmares. When I think back to that half-closed door, I still must stand in front of it, enduring unamenable torment. Moreover, for some reason, I often think back to my friend's funeral, feeling that something is not right. I feel that the person lying in the coffin during the farewell ceremony was not Chin. Mr. Chen Song, at this point, my emotions are rather complicated, and I have hesitated several times before writing. I'm sorry, I didn't finish the letter before sending it to you. Please return the letter to me after reading this part, and there's no need to include a reply. I will tell you what happened next, and the next letter is very important. I will only send the next letter to you after confirming that you have read this one, wishing you well. Yours sincerely, a loyal reader. This letter was suddenly interrupted, and I carefully read the entire text to confirm that there was no subsequent content before putting down the letter. The events described in the letter have a vague impression on me. When I was traveling around the world to experience life and accumulate creative materials, I did encounter an episode in a small town. The person I met was a high school student, but many details have already become blurry. Looking back, that was in 1998, and that trip should have been my last long period of wandering. Since 2000, I have settled in this city and focused on writing. The people and things I encountered during my travels eventually turned into fragments and appeared in my works. I was always in a hurry, with little interaction with the locals. Therefore, I don't know about their later lives. However, after reading this letter, I urgently want to know the sequel. I immediately sent the letter back to the reader according to his request. That evening, after my wife returned home from the exhibition, I was still thinking about this issue, and the more I thought about it, the more shocked I felt. I always felt that there was something missing in this matter. My wife said that the exhibition today was great, and I casually asked, "Who did you go with?" My wife replied, "A friend who sent me the calligraphy and paintings." Then she looked at me for a moment and asked, "Why are you so restless today? Do you want to talk about it?" My wife is always very perceptive. She used to be my psychologist. As a writer specializing in horror themes, I often delve into the exploration of horror elements, thus suffering from mental problems. My psychologist has given me a lot of help. We maintained a doctor-patient relationship for several years, eventually developing more emotions and becoming spouses. Thanks to my wife's companionship, I have been able to walk steadily on this path of writing. My wife noticed my abnormality, but I didn't want to tell her about it at this time. I wanted to wait for the second letter to come before saying anything. So, another week passed, and it was the weekend. My wife didn't go out and was busy in the kitchen, while I was reading in my study as usual. At this moment, the postman finally delivered the second letter. "Dear Mr. Chen Song, thank you for your reply, and I am relieved because this indicates that you are still interested in my story. The following content has been carefully revised, and I have decided to adopt a direct narrative style. In 2003, after Chin Yu's death, I thought I could move on from the past, but it turned out otherwise. I was still haunted by nightmares at night, dreaming of the half-closed door and Chin Yu's funeral. When I recalled the funeral in 2003, I realized that something was off at the time. The funeral was held 3 days after the body was laid out, and it was only then that I had a chance to see Chin Yu's corpse. To be honest, when I saw her, I was not only scared but also felt unfamiliar. Although it had been 5 years, and the body had become bloated and unrecognizable, I still felt unfamiliar. I had the feeling that the person in the coffin was not Chinyu. It was a bold thought, but it became stronger in my mind. I looked around, and everyone at the funeral was in mourning, seemingly only I doubted it. Chinyu's father was reading the eulogy on stage, but I couldn't immerse myself in the sadness. I looked up and around, and at that moment, I was stunned. I seemed to see Chinyu in the crowd, my heart racing. I looked closely and found that I had made a mistake. It was a stranger. After the funeral, I hid in a dark corner and observed the woman. She was like Chinyu, with fair skin, black straight hair, round face, slender figure, especially long neck, and outstanding temperament. She was not from the local area, and I asked my parents. They didn't know who she was either, so I was puzzled. After the funeral, I followed that woman. That night, she drove out of the small town. Based on the license plate, she was from a big city, not the city where Chinyu went to college. At that time, having a car was not common, and hers was not a cheap one. I couldn't understand why a rich person from a big city would come all the way to this small town to attend a funeral of a young girl from the town. It wasn't until half a year later that I found the answer. I put down my prejudices and started to like Chinsong's works again, purely as a reader. I spent half a year reading his previous works, including the short stories I had read when I was in high school. Chinsong's early works had already revealed his astonishing talent. We had a premonition then that he would be famous later. Now, it turned out to be true. Half a year later, I started to pay attention to Chinsong's recent situation because I was looking forward to his new work. In a writer's interview, I saw the mysterious woman who had attended Chinyu's funeral again. It turned out she was Chinsong's wife and a psychologist. This connection made me think deeply. After the college entrance examination, Chinsong and Chinyu had a secret past. Now I had put this matter aside, and it was natural for literati to be emotional. It was just a small episode in Chinsong's travel experience, and it was over. There wouldn't be any intersection between the two of them anymore. However, 5 years later, Chinyu died in an accident, and Chinsong's wife was at Chinyu's funeral. Could there be such a coincidence in the world? Who would inform him? Did Chinyu's death have something to do with Chinsong? This thought made me break into a cold sweat. It just happened to be the National Day holiday, and I went back to my hometown to look for answers. I stayed in my hometown for a week and met many classmates who had stayed local or came back for the holiday, adding up to more than half of the class. The class monitor organized a class reunion, and we chatted and remembered the past while drinking. I brought up the topic of Chinyu, and everyone discussed for a while, but since the person was already dead, the discussion didn't go too far. However, the more I listened, the more I was terrified, and the more I drank, the more I was sober. When talking about Chinyu, we all knew which city she went to after graduation and what she studied in college. But this information came from Chinyu's parents, and no one seemed to have maintained a direct connection with her in recent years. Chinyu loved beauty, and she had said she wanted to take portrait photos when she went to college. Therefore, there should be more recent photos of her. However, why was her portrait taken 5 years ago in high school? As the conversation continued, I continued to subtly extract information from my classmates, and the time went back to 5 years ago. I reconstructed the scandal that spread through the town after the college entrance examination based on the accounts of multiple people from diverse perspectives. Gradually, a chilling truth was revealed. After that incident, Chinyu seemed to have disappeared from people's sight. Everyone thought she was avoiding shame, and I also held some resentment towards her, so I didn't actively look for her. Shortly afterwards, they quietly moved away, leaving in the early morning when no one was paying attention. During the summer vacation, everyone was busy with their own things, and the class reunion couldn't be held. After the vacation ended, everyone either went to college or started working, each pursuing their own future. After that incident, Chinyu seemed to have vanished into thin air, and my last impression of her was that half-open door. In the past 5 years, Chinyu had disappeared without a trace, and there must be a secret hidden behind it. I determined to explore the truth, otherwise, I would never be able to the nightmare of that door. 6 months ago, after the funeral of Chin's family, they left again. Over the years, they had been living outside, returning home occasionally. I learned from my neighbor about the current address of Chin's family and immediately set out to visit them. I found Chinyu's mother alone and invited her to dinner, naturally talking about Chinyu and asking about her college life. At first, Chinyu's mother could answer some questions, but she couldn't handle in-depth questioning and eventually started to evade the topic and her eyes became shifty. Under my sharp questioning, she finally broke down and told the truth. The day after the college entrance examination ended, Chinyu told her mother that she was going to do something brave. She said that she had always done things with her friends before, but this time she wanted to do it alone. I thought that my idea was unique, but it turned out that Chinyu was the same. Chin's mother didn't pay much attention, just reminding Chinyu to come home early. However, she never came back after that. At that time, we were too naive, daring to plunge into love just based on 2 months of acquaintance. We were attracted by Chinsong's erudition and talent, but we ignored the fact that he was a mysterious outsider. Chinyu accompanied Chinsong to play adult games after the college entrance examination, and he killed her afterwards. In 1998, Chinyu had already passed away. After learning the truth, I was speechless for a long time, and my heart was filled with mixed emotions. If I had pushed open that door back then, would Chinyu have been able to avoid disaster? Or would I have died at the hands of Chinsong? I don't know the answer. All I know is that I am still alive at this moment. Because of my caution and timidity, I didn't push open that door, escaped from the terror, and saved my life. The events that occurred in that timeline passed me by. I cannot see what happened after the college entrance examination. Chinsong killed Chinyu. He could have disposed of the body secretly. After all, Chinyu went to his house secretly. Although Chinyu's mother didn't say it explicitly, I accidentally discovered the affair and made it public, attracting widespread attention. In this way, Chinsong and Chinyu were closely linked together and became the focus of everyone's attention. Chinyu's father and brother stormed to Chinsong's house to demand an explanation. Chinsong had no way to refute, so he simply told everything and offered an astronomical compensation for the residents of the small town in 1998. Chinyu had already died, and no matter what, she could never come back. The only thing that could come back was a huge sum of money. Chinyu's father and brother stormed in, came out in silence, and eventually they accepted Chinsong's suggestion, went along with the rumors, and secretly moved away from the small town. The family in the moving van became the secret discovered by the small town residents after the morning fog dissipated. After disposing of the body, Chinsong also left the small town, and the sensational scandal finally came to an end. In 2000, the National Household Registration System was not yet perfect, so after moving to a new city and a little manipulation on the household registration, Chinyu's name disappeared completely from the world. The Chin family started a new life in their new location, and outsiders only knew that they had an only child. Everything seemed to be properly resolved, but there were still hidden dangers. Because the connections between people in the world are intricate, it is not easy to break them off completely. In these years, although the Chin family had moved away from the small town, they couldn't completely detach themselves from it. Their ancestors had all lived here, and they would occasionally return to visit their old home. In the new city, there would also be relatives or old friends who would drop by to visit. When old friends met, they would always ask about their children. At first, the Chin family made up stories to evade the question, saying that their daughter had been admitted to a certain university and rarely came home. But these words had to be whispered, and when new neighbors passed by, they had to be quiet immediately. However, lies will always be exposed. Every time they returned to their old home, there were always 3 of them, but Chinyu was always absent. People would eventually suspect that Chinyu was physiologically dead, but not yet socially. Especially in the small town, only by solving this problem could they permanently resolve it. Therefore, in 2003, the Chin family specifically found a mentally unstable homeless woman and brought her back to the town in disguise. That year, the SARS epidemic raged, and wearing masks didn't seem strange. The homeless woman followed the Chin family, and the townspeople naturally assumed that the masked woman was their daughter. Shortly after returning home, they drowned the homeless woman in a water jar and threw her shoes into the swift river, claiming that their daughter had fallen into the water. The neighbors helped to search for 3 days and nights, and the homeless woman's body was thrown in the water jar for 3 days and nights until it became swollen, deformed, and unrecognizable. They eventually threw the body into the garbage collecting bend in the river at night. The next day, when it was discovered, it was followed by a funeral declaring the social death of Chin Yu. The Chin family did not accomplish this alone. They had previously consulted with Chin Song, using the reputation of a famous horror writer as a bargaining chip. Chin Song's wife was also aware of this, which was why she attended the funeral. From the discovery of the fake corpse to the funeral and the cremation and burial, she made sure that nothing went wrong in the whole city. After the second transaction, the problem was solved once and for all, and there was no need to worry anymore. There would be no third time, because Chin Yu had truly died, and her body was cremated and buried, and everything was settled. The ashes in the tomb were Chin Yu, and all those who came to offer their condolences could testify that the matter was resolved perfectly, and there was nothing to criticize. If the Chin family wanted to retract their confession in the future, they would have no evidence to present. The ashes were just a box of inorganic matter, unable to uncover the secrets of the living. Now, Chin's mother told me the truth, but I cannot confirm or refute it. I just obtained a cruel truth that I don't know if it's true or not. Chin's mother said that they were sorry to Chin Yu and the homeless woman, but they had no choice because they chose that road back then, and they had to keep going. I looked at Chin's mother's grief-stricken expression, and my stomach churned. Before leaving, she comforted me and told me to forget about it, as it had been too long and had nothing to do with me. We all needed to move on. However, after that, I not only failed to escape the nightmare, but fell into a deeper and more profound one. I kept returning to the day after the college entrance examination, the day Chin Yu died. Now the only person who had been to the scene, if I had done something instead of quietly leaving Chin Yu, would there have been a glimmer of hope? I was trapped in such daydreams every day, being tortured by nightmares. Of course, I hoped that this matter had nothing to do with me and would simply pass. But day and night, I couldn't help but daydream and regret, living in endless self-blame and pain. One early morning, I woke up and went to the bathroom to wash my face. Suddenly, I saw Chin Yu's face in the mirror and screamed, smashing the mirror with all my might. The shards fell to the ground. My life was also shattered like the mirror, and I knew that Chin Yu could not rest in peace under the ground. For so many years, he had blamed me for not saving him. And now, I can do nothing. I don't even know where his real body is, and I can't apologize to him face to face. Wait! What did I just think of? Chin Yu's real body? Suddenly, I realized that the matter was not as hopeless as I thought, and the ashes in the tomb had been settled. Everyone believed that was Chin Yu. But from another perspective, if we could find Chin Yu's real body and prove that this body was also Chin Yu, then the contradiction would emerge. Regardless of how to prove that the police's technical means should be supported, the key is where is the true body of Chin Yu? The second-floor small building that Chin Song rented years ago has been demolished and rebuilt, and no news of bodies being dug up was reported during the reconstruction. Although the town is not small, it is not big, surrounded by mountains and water, making it difficult to find, like searching for a needle in a haystack. Only Chin Song knows where the body is, and I finally understood what I could do. Now, my life is in chaos, and I urgently need to make changes. I inadvertently became involved in my friend's murder case, which made things complicated as I became a variable. Since I have learned part of the truth, I can't run away. I must strive to reveal the complete truth, otherwise Chin Yu will not let me off. It's not easy to get information about the corpse from Chin Song. After all, this is not something that can be openly discussed, but I can only take one step at a time. In 2004, I quit my job and came to the city where Chin Song lives. After graduating from college, I wandered outside and didn't have friends or lovers, so I could go anywhere. Fortunately, the major I studied has a large market demand, and after coming to the new city, I quickly found a job with flexible working hours, which allows me to handle my own affairs. First, I found the publishing house where Chinsong had long-term cooperation through public information. Then I waited for Chinsong's appearance and followed him at the publishing house. Finally, I discovered that Chinsong lived in a high-rise building, so I rented a single room in the building opposite his and bought a high-power telescope to observe them. I even used all my free time to observe Chinsong, looking for breakthroughs, and even studied the garbage they threw out every day. After 2 months of tailing and observation, I found that Chinsong suffered from a severe mental illness. He and his wife were not only husband and wife, but also doctor and patient. It is unethical for a psychologist and patient to fall in love and continue treatment. To avoid attention, they conducted the treatment at home. They would sit face to face and talk or undergo psychological therapy from time to time. This often requires looking back at the past. This indicates that Chinsong trusts his wife very much, and his wife also knows his secrets and supports him. I sensed that the information I wanted would appear in the psychological therapy, but the key is, how can I know the content of the treatment? I need to get closer to them. I had a brief encounter with Chinsong, but I'm not sure if he remembers me. I can't take any risks, so I decided to approach Chinsong's wife. Chinsong's wife is named Zhongwan. After observing her for 2 months, I basically understand her habits and preferences. She goes to the yoga studio 3 days a week, which is fixed. She also likes to go to museums to see exhibitions, depending on the updates. She particularly enjoys embroidery exhibitions. Once there was a crazy quilt exhibition here for a month, and she went to see it several times. Both yoga and visiting exhibitions are hobbies she pursues independently, without involving Chinsong or friends, so this is a good point of breakthrough. I signed up for a course for a period to study yoga and paid attention to half a year's exhibition previews, learning related knowledge in advance, and making adequate preparations. Then, I presented myself as a middle-class woman like Zhongwan, and my decent job really supported this image, to approach her. I signed up for the same yoga class as her and smoothly became acquaintances with her. We met by coincidence at an exhibition. My well-prepared knowledge impressed her, and in the subsequent yoga classes, she actively conversed with me, talking about the last exhibition. Gradually, Zhongwan often invited me to watch exhibitions with her. Before each exhibition, I made full preparations to chat with her the next day. Zhongwan felt that she had met me too late, and we gradually became close friends. Of course, she never mentioned Chinsong, protecting him well and not introducing us to each other. However, recently her attitude has softened, and she even invited me to dinner at her home. In general, my relationship with Zhongwan is quite harmonious. Like most friends in the world, we have spent many wonderful times together, visiting exhibitions, shopping, and tasting delicious food. We experienced all the things we had promised with Jinyu. Sometimes I even forget my real purpose and immerse myself in it, because Zhongwan's temperament is quite like Jinyu's, and perhaps Chinsong likes this type of woman. And I also like this type of friend. A year after getting to know Zhongwan, I gave her a beautiful embroidery picture, which could be used as a wall lamp when connected to electricity. Zhongwan, who liked embroidery, happily received it and hung it up at home that day. Just like the beautiful wooden national emblem presented by the Soviet Yun pioneers to the U.S. ambassador to the USSR in 1945, this embroidery picture also symbolizes false friendship. I did some things to the picture, so that not only did Zhongwan power the wall lamp, but she also powered a small component hidden in the picture, allowing me to know the whole truth. While reading the second letter, I lost control several times, but I still forced myself to continue reading. However, at this point, I could no longer bear it. I picked up the ashtray by my side and threw it at the embroidery hanging on the wall. My wife, who was busy in the kitchen, heard the noise and quickly came over, only to see the embroidery in my hand torn to shreds. She asked, "What are you doing? Why didn't you go out today, and why have you been busy in the kitchen all day?" I replied, "Didn't I tell you? A friend is coming to visit today, and I'm preparing some food for her." She asked, "Is this the friend who gave you this painting?" As the embroidery in my hand shattered, I found the hidden bug inside. Seeing this, my wife also fell silent. This embroidery has been hanging on the wall of my home since 2005, and it has been 3 years now. For 3 years, all the secrets I've confided in during psychological therapy have been secretly listened to by an outsider. I crushed the bug and threw it out the window. At this moment, my mind was in chaos. I was both angry and afraid, and I didn't know what else to do. I walked back and forth for a few rounds before finally sitting down to continue reading the letters. I yearned to know the whole truth. After the college entrance examination ended, Chin Song and the Chin family reached an agreement to keep the death of Chin Yu a secret, and the Chin family later moved away from the small town. Chin Song was responsible for dealing with the body, and their plan was seamless, so the police didn't need to get involved. If I can find the real body, I can reopen the case and seek justice for Chin Yu, while also freeing myself. In the 1990s, Chin Song wasn't just involved in one case, he was a habitual offender, and in order to become a genius in the field of horror fiction, he turned himself into a devil. He had committed multiple crimes during his travels in search of inspiration for his heart-stopping horror plots. At the time, his nomadic lifestyle, lack of specific targets, and limited technology allowed him to escape the law, and later he quit his criminal ways and became a successful ghostwriter. However, his excessive exploration of horror had a severe impact on his life, and he had to undergo frequent psychological treatments. He told Zhongwon everything in detail, asking her to help him desensitize and forget. Each time he told the story, he would forget more. After a few years, he had already forgotten most of the details of the crime and was able to sleep peacefully. I listened to him for 3 years and learned the complete truth about the matter. I had tried to recreate the scandal that circulated in that small town during that era from different people's perspectives. I sought out my high school classmates and Chin Yu's mother. I thought I had understood the truth until I saw it all from Chin Song's perspective, and then I realized that my previous understanding was all wrong. That night, I took off the listening device in my rented room and stared at the ceiling for a long time. I lost the ability to think and could only cry. I hugged my knees and curled up in my bed, crying all night. The truth is so cruel. After the college entrance examination, Chin Yu went to Chin Song's house, and no one ever saw her again. I stood in front of that slightly ajar door. I was the last one, but did I see Chin Yu? No. I didn't push open that door, even though in my dreams I had pushed it open countless times, but at that moment, I didn't. I left. I was the kind of solitary person who never actively pursued anything, didn't have the persistence to ask questions, and even the impulses of adolescence were fleeting. Others think I'm arrogant, but in fact, I'm just timid. I'm very timid and very tactful. As soon as I detect the slightest hint, I will take the initiative to retreat, even avoiding 3 steps. Not only do I retreat, but I also think highly of myself. It wasn't until 10 years later that I broke the inertia of taking things for granted and truly understood what happened inside the door I didn't push open. That day, Chin Yu came to Chin Song's house alone. Chin Song warmly received her and invited her to appreciate novels in the upstairs study. However, when Chin Yu walked through the door, what awaited her was not a bookshelf and novels, but a bed and murder weapons such as axes and knives. Chin Yu was brutally raped and murdered in the room. The date we had been looking forward to for a month turned out to be a devil's invitation. Chin Song invited us to his house with the intention of killing us. Chin Yu arrived at his house one day earlier, so he carried out the crime earlier. Chin Song was not interested in the pure love confession of a little girl. He raped Chin Yu and stabbed her more than 20 times. After the murder, Chin Song threw the knife aside and watched Chin Yu crawl towards the door with bloodstains all over the floor, struggling to get there. He didn't stop her because Chin Yu had been stabbed more than 20 times and must not have survived. Chin Yu used all her strength, struggling desperately, and barely crawled to the door. At this moment, her only thought was to leave this terrifying room. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of light. Chinyu finally crawled to the door, reaching out to try to open it, but through the gap in the door, she saw my figure climbing the stairs. At that moment, she wanted to call out to me, warn me not to come closer, but she was worried about waking Chinsong. My friend Chinyu knew me well. She knew that I was a timid and sensible person who would immediately leave if I sensed anything abnormal. In her final moments of life, Chinyu did her best to make a misunderstood ambiguous gesture. She called out Chinsong's name in a weak voice, trying to attract my attention. She crawled on the ground, her hand outstretched with blood, and closed the door herself. Chinyu and I had grown up together. We had experienced laughter, jealousy, trust, and suspicion. However, now of her death, Chinyu still chose to protect me, destroying her own personality and closing the door, snuffing out her last vestige of hope for survival. And I knew nothing about it. I spent a month slandering her, 5 years resenting her, and another 5 years trying to get rid of her. It wasn't until 10 years later that I truly opened the door and realized that my friend Chinyu was not just any girl. Although I didn't witness everything firsthand, I made hasty conclusions without ever doubting them. Chinyu knew me well, but I no longer trusted her. Now, Chinyu is punishing me, making me aware of the truth. From now on, I will live the rest of my life in pain and regret, never able to escape this lasting torment. Although the story has ended, the life of atonement has just begun. I am writing this long letter, telling you my story with a heart filled with anxiety, just to ask you, are you willing to share my eternal suffering? I don't have the courage to avenge myself violently, I don't have the courage to kill or set fire, and I can't bear to see your talent go to waste. I can only do my best to decide for the rest of our lives. Mr. Chinsong, for a writer, losing your creative inspiration is undoubtedly a kind of pain, and it may even make you unable to continue writing. However, as a loyal reader, I earnestly ask you to continue creating. If one day I find that you can't create brilliant works anymore, I will have no choice but to expose the psychological therapy tapes I know to the media. Although the case of Chinyu has not yet attracted the attention of the police, several cases have already occurred in which the bodies of the victims have been found, and the police have opened an investigation, which remains unsolved to this day. I have always been a great fan of your novels, so I earnestly ask you to please continue creating. Please continue to observe your life, and I hope that you can throw yourself into writing every day. In addition, your wife Zhongwan deeply loves you. Despite hearing many unconscionable crimes as your psychologist, she still chose to marry you. This baffles me. However, regardless, she is my friend, and we have maintained a pleasant friendship for many years. I do not want this friendship to end because of these things. I hope we can be friends forever so that I can find comfort in my pain. Although I have told you these things, it will not affect Zhongwan continuing to fulfill the duties of a good friend. If she cannot continue to provide emotional support for me, I will also make these things public. From now on, I will set a daily timed email and manually adjust it to be 1 day late. If I die one day, whether by accident or by human cause, this information will be automatically sent to the media the next day. I will remind myself to revise the email every day, and the thing I regret most in my life. I will push that huge rock up the mountain like Sisyphus. If you agree with the above conditions, please return this letter to me sandwiched between a signed copy of your novel. Best wishes, your loyal reader. On my first visit to my friend's home, I felt a little nervous. Fortunately, both my friend and her husband were very warm and welcoming. Mr. Zhong introduced Heng to me, saying, "This is Heng. She often visits exhibitions with me." Although his tone was a bit stiff, she still smiled. "I often hear one mention you." Chinsong greeted me and gave me a gift, a signed novel with his autograph, which also contained a letter envelope. I have read this work and I really like it. So, we started talking about literature. This scene felt familiar to me, but it had been 10 years, and my mindset was different. Soon, it was dinner time. We wanted to taste this long-awaited reunion through delicious food, talking and laughing as we clinked our glasses. The alcohol began to take effect, and I squinted, looking carefully at my two friends, and my thoughts drifted back to a month ago. A month ago, I returned to my hometown town and climbed a mountain alone. When I reached the top of the mountain, I saw the forest waves swirling like the sea and heard the buzzing echoes between the peaks. I stood at the highest point and shouted towards the endless mountains and rivers, "Chinyu, I'm sorry. I just hope this belated apology can reach your ears, which were abandoned in this vast mountain range when you were 18 years old." Thank you for your listening. The article ends here.